A father is neither an anchor to hold us back, nor a sail to take us there, but a guiding light whose love shows us the way. Unknown author. All right. Welcome to another episode of the Liberty Dad podcast, a discussion on politics and culture. I'm your host, DL, America's most objective libertarian. Today, we are having another episode of Dad Talk, the real Dad Talk, not the kind where I just ramble on, the kind where we bring a dad on. Dad Talk is my series to bring on everyday dads and talk about what is important to them. The goal of Dad Talk is to raise voices, to raise dad voices, no argument, no debate. And my only requirements are that we keep it family friendly and whatever we talk about is related to being a dad. Tonight, David Moscrip joins me in this episode to discuss mentoring versus teaching. So please welcome David to Dad Talk. Let me get him up in. We get it there. There he is. Sir, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you doing, DL?
Very well. Now that I got past my um, uh, audio issues from earlier, so what? Oh, that's wait, that's not going to work. That's okay. We're gonna have to work on some of these visuals here, but so folks, here's how it worked out. Right before the show, we were having a little bit of an audio problem, and it was because I had selected the wrong microphone, and and so we got that worked out. And then OBS, the program that I use to stream with, I opened it in the wrong order. So it wasn't getting the audio correct. So I shut that down, restarted, and I think it shifted my microphone on Rumble. So then when I went live, everybody was like, hey, there's no audio. What's up? And so then I had to deal with an angry audience yelling at me. Like you can look in the comments. They were using all caps. I need a safe space. All right, David, you're here to tell us, you're going to talk about mentoring versus just, teaching. So let's start from the beginning. You're a dad. Tell us about you being a dad. Like, let's just kind of start with the beginning.
Yeah, I have a 21-year-old daughter, a 15-year-old son, and an 11-year-old son. And I'll just say that having a child 21 years ago was very different than having a child 11 years ago when it came to the energy level and all of that. Um, and
Did you
one of
have
the
to start
first
going to the
things.
gym?
Oh man, more recently. So here's why. Like recently, my youngest son was like, "Hey, Dad, can we go do blank?"
Right,
And I was like, "No, man. How about you get your brother to do that with you?" And in my head, I was like, "Shut up, you idiot! Like you would have done this with your oldest.
right.
Why don't you feel like doing this?" And so yeah, I started this routine. I wake up. Depending on how I'm feeling, because I have asthma and some health issues, I'll either walk or run
Mhm.
3.5 miles, and then throughout the day, because I also have attention issues, when I get sidetracked with my work, I'll do push-ups like 20 or 30 at a time.
Mhm.
And that's just got me back into having a lot more energy where it's like, no, let's go. So now I help coach my youngest son's baseball team. And I feel like I'm back to, yeah, let's go do this, guys. Come on, let's go. Let's go. Because you just fall into these routines.
Right. No, I think that's awesome. I'm 46 and my son is 6. So by the time he's like 10 or 11, right? Like
Yeah.
I'm just getting older. So I'm like, I try to keep up my energy. Well, we got a dog that helps out because
Yeah. Yeah.
who
Yeah.
ex- who walks and exercises the dog? Me. That's
Exactly.
so
Exactly.
I take her out, and since I can't keep up running, obviously, I rollerblade with her. I kind of kindle back, I rekindle my younger years, and I rollerblade around the neighborhood with my dog, which gives me some exercise, and I like to cycle. So anyway,
So be honest, do you rollerblade with your dog or does she pull you like you're behind a boat, like
at the
skiing?
very beginning, she pulls because she's just like excited. She's like, "We're going on a run." She's like, "Pew," and so she goes flying, right? And I cannot keep up with her. Like she goes fast. at that moment. Late, we only go about a mile because you could tell that she kind of gets worn down a little bit around 3/4 of a mile, and so she's like kind of doing a light
Right.
jog at
Right.
that point. But so probably about after that first quarter mile, I'm doing most of my own work. But that
Okay.
first quarter
Yeah.
mile or so, roughly about the first quarter mile, she does a lot of pulling, and I've even kind of like been like mush, mush, you know.
Yeah, that's actually, I have like a little bit of a confession here. Is part of the final thing that pushed me over the edge of I need to start working out is I was reading this article about how they're coming out with like these life extending drugs, right? And the next step is to get it approved for dogs. And so if your dog is in good shape, it can extend their lifespan.
Mhm.
And I thought, oh man, my dog's getting fat. I need to start exercising. And that was that first day I tried to take her out on a walk, I thought, oh man, no, it's not just a dog. I really needed to do this as well.
That's funny. So you were saying, I'm sorry, we got sidetracked there. You were talking about you were saying like, hey, you got this, newfound energy because you've been doing push-ups at work when your work is boring, and then you exercise in the morning to kind of keep your asthma under control. So you like that's where you were.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I mean, I kind of have the benefit of working from home
Mhm,
and doing a lot of different things part time. And so I've kind of, I mean, this goes back to 6 years ago. I was just kind of like miserable because I felt like I was spending all of my time out of the house at a job, and I thought, man, I'm totally missing my kids growing up.
mhm,
And my wife said, why don't you quit and turn some of these things that you're doing as a hobby into your job?
mhm.
And so I quit. And it was very, like, I had never quit a job. I grew up not having a lot of money. So I worked, from high school on up, two
Right,
jobs, even in high school, two or three jobs throughout my life. So it was very unnerving for me for probably about a year. And then all of a sudden I kind of like gained traction. And now, yeah, I have a schedule where I can work everything around my kids. I have to be in the office 2 days a week, and it's because one of the things I do is I lead worship at my church, and they like me there for staff meetings, and they prefer I be there for Sunday mornings as well.
right, right.
Yeah,
Fair enough. Awesome. So that's great. I like to hear that because my guess, just in general, is that there are a lot of dads out there that they don't really seize the opportunities that are in front of them. And I mean
right.
that for their families, not necessarily for the job per se, but that too. So I think it's great to hear the story of somebody like, hey, this is an opportunity I had, I seized it. Right. And not everybody gets to work from home. Not everybody necessarily can quit their job and, you know, generate revenue, presumably from their hobbies or whatnot. So, like I understand that, but at the same time, you work with what you have and you
Right.
make the best of it. And so I think that's great. And I would encourage any dad listening, just look for opportunities because there's no scarcity of opportunities. All right. So you've got, I'm sorry, did you say 3 or 4 children?
I have three children,
3. Okay.
and yeah, I mean, part of that is, I thought there's because I get offers from people, come work here, come do this,
Mhm.
and I really have to weigh it of, do I want to be able to have more money right
Mhm.
now, or do I want to be able to have more quality time with my children and give up some of these other things? And
Right.
so I've just kind of fallen on the side of, for right now, my youngest is 11. I don't have, that's my last one. I have, but like 7 more years likely of him being at home. So I might as well enjoy it
Mhm.
while I can do that. And then I can always jump back into the other stuff if I want to.
Right, right. It's kind of I think it's kind of fun, kind of interesting to be able to work from home, because like, well, aside from my son going to school, like you always have that, you have like this extra availability sort of. I mean, I know it's work, but you can like if I go into an office 9 to 5, 9 to 5 is it doesn't matter whether he's home on spring break or whatever, he doesn't get to see daddy. Period.
Yeah,
But if I work from home, which I do, then he does get to see daddy, and sometimes I have to corral that and be like, "Hey, daddy's working. So you're gonna have to go."
exactly. Yeah.
Like what I like to tell him, this is independent playtime, son.
Right. Right. No, absolutely.
Yeah.
But there's sometimes where I say, look, give me Monday and Tuesday.
Mhm.
just to work all day long, and I'll
Mhm.
try to get like everything done by the time you're out of school on Wednesday, and then we can hang out like the
Yep.
rest of the week, you know. And so that's what I love about the flexibility of it. And Casey, my wife, also works from home most of the time. She has to travel a lot for her job, but so we both have our separate areas of the house that we go to, because
Right.
you know it doesn't matter how well you get along, you will drive each other insane if you're 100% of the time around each other. So we kind
Right.
of have both figured out this routine where we both have to also understand each other have different work cycles and how we operate. And it's, you know, even though we're home, it's not that we're not working. So there's a lot of things you have to figure out in that,
Mhm.
just like if you were in an office. But yeah,
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 absolutely. Yeah, you gotta work out your routine. How are you gonna do things? Instead of what time am I gonna go to the water cooler? What time am I gonna go to the refrigerator, right? Like, it's just,
yeah,
but it's basically the same concept. Okay,
yeah.
so we're gonna talk about mentoring versus teaching. So go ahead and in your mind, describe to me what each one of those means, and then let's kind of dive into what you mean in doing one over the other.
Yeah, I would say teaching is what in my mind I would consider like the traditional, you do this, you do that,
Mhm.
obey what I tell you. If you don't, you're going to get punished.
Mhm.
I mean, not to say there's not room for punishment. You know that if you don't punish your child, they're somebody you don't want to be around eventually.
Right.
But that's the ability to. That was kind of what I was going for. The ability to structure all of this stuff around my children, at least for a period of time, of being able to teach them. You know, like Scripture says. Since I'm a Christian, you know, I kind of look to that of, you know, teaching your children along the way, and to that means like. I drag them along to the political events I do. I
Mhm.
drag them along. Like my 15-year-old actually works at the church where I do now, very part-time, running audio visual, because he was volunteering and just latched onto it. So he comes down, and you know he'll have all my gear cleaned up before I'm even done talking to people. And it's just kind of like he's learned these things just from being around me versus me
Right.
saying, do this, do this, do this. It's he takes an interest in what I'm doing, because I really believe that you're, and this is the terrifying thing, as you know, about being a parent, is children watch you and they want to be like you.
Right. Right. And they only pick up all the things that you don't want them to pick up. At least those are the ones that they prioritize. They're
Right.
like, "Oh, daddy said a swear word. That's the word I should use." Right?
Yeah.
Not any of the other 1,000 words that you use. That one. Right.
Yeah, yeah. Oh man, I have to tell you, there's my children have heard me use a swear word twice, right? Right. And they
Right.
giggled so much. I was at the Brandon Mall over in Tampa area, right? And we were walking through the parking lot, and this guy just starts backing up his pickup truck. And I just like smacked the side of his truck and told him what I was going to kick if he ran over my children.
Right.
And the guy, you know, pulled forward real quick, and we started walking, and I looked over, and my youngest had his, he was like trying not to laugh, you know, and looked over at me, and I was like, I'm sorry, man. You know, I said, but you know what? Like that was an appropriate time, like for
Right.
emphasis of dude, pay attention to what you're doing. You're going to kill somebody.
Yeah.
And the
I
other
get
time was, yeah, the other time we were in London, and this guy almost ran over again my youngest, and I just like he almost ran over my son, and I kicked the back of his bike while he was going past and yelled at him and
Mhm.
said something I shouldn't have, and he turned around, but it was just like the things that the things that really get me upset enough to do that is when you're just like not paying attention to others and not caring
Right.
for the well-being of others. And sorry, we got sidetracked, but definitely they remember that. They're always like,
Right.
remember that one time when
Yep, yep. And I was in London, you said? I
yeah, yeah.
Oh, any chance that you were like, "You bloody wanker"? No? Okay. I just
I
figured
wish I would have
I'd
thought of
ask.
that.
I'd
Yeah.
ask. No, it's funny. My son, he's 6. When he was 5, this is about probably like 6 months ago. He asked he was we were sitting at the table, we're all eating dinner, and he's just casually eating and drops an F-bomb, like, out of nowhere, and he used it correctly. It was like, "Yeah, that's," he said something like, "Yeah, that's effing cool." And he's just, like, eating really casually, and my wife looks at me, and I look at her, and he's, like, just continuing eating like nothing, and I was like, excuse me, buddy, what'd you say? And he was like, yeah, that's effing cool or something. I don't remember exactly what he said, but it was, and I'm like, oh, so I was like, son, I was like, that is an adult word. And I said, you do not use that word until you get bigger. And he was like, oh, I'm sorry, daddy. Okay. And like, it was a done deal. It was just so funny because like it was just so casual, like it was just any old
Yeah.
word. And I was like, wow, like, and I'm not gonna get angry at him over it. Like, like
Right.
he's still
Right.
learning, and if he heard daddy do it, which is probably, I don't swear a lot, but then I
Yeah.
get upset sometimes. So, all
Yeah.
right. So
At
anyway,
least he didn't pull like the Christmas vacation thing and say, "I'm
right,
sorry, I meant effing sweet."
right. So, okay. Back to mentoring versus teaching. So teaching, you're saying, is like just pointing and saying, do this, do this, do that. And then
Yeah.
mentoring for you, that means what?
You're spending time with them. They're learning from you, instead of giving them a list of, "Hey, do this," and because I felt like, I don't like to be the person that bashes my parents, but I think that was like a whole generational thing before
Mhm.
us as well. Is it was kind of like a, you do this because I'm your parent, and
Right.
there's definitely a time for that. But at the same time, I think that kids can get frustrated because there's times when, because my oldest is so much older than my second child, my oldest
Mhm.
son, that I had this tendency when he was 12 years old, I realized, to treat him like, well, you should just know how to do this. And then I had to remind myself, no, just because he acts older doesn't mean he just automatically knows how to do these. I had to remind myself, okay, this is a 12-year-old boy.
Mhm.
You're just frustrating him and you're going to drive him away from you eventually. And I didn't want to do that because, like, my relationship with my oldest is, she's my buddy. She's 21 years old, and having a 21-year-old daughter who's your best friend is, you're never going to have anybody that knows you like that.
Right. Right.
And so I want that relationship with each of my children. So just like I said, taking them, so they can interact with other people the way that I do. Like, my youngest thought it was so cool that he happened to be wearing a similar outfit to Mike Termont when he was the vice presidential candidate. We went to this fundraiser. He's got this little like mini me pose next to him. It's
Right.
it's really cute, but they've learned how to speak with, like, they can hold their own speaking with, like, corporate executives, or people like Mike or whoever it is. I mean, I could probably have them jump on the podcast and do this better than me. and
Right.
and I feel like that's because I didn't like talk down to them. I didn't baby talk. I said,
Right.
you ask me anything and I will not lie to you. I might tell you I'm not going to tell you that yet, but
Right.
i'm
Right.
not going to i'm not going to lie to you about something, and you find that out later on. I want them to learn from me, as fallible as I am,
Mhm.
as much as I can teach them.
Yeah, absolutely. We kind of take a similar approach. If our son asks us something, is so long as it's appropriate, then we will
Right.
tell him, right? More than likely. If he asks a question where it's kind of like ambiguous, like should we tell him, then maybe we'll kind of tell him at a higher level. And then sometimes, like you said, hey, yeah, you don't need to know that,
Yeah.
and he doesn't really, I don't think he doesn't really ask questions that require us to get to that point very often. Usually the questions they're asking, we're talking about some real estate thing that my wife is doing, and he'll be like, "What's that about?" And we'll tell him. We'll be like, "Oh, well, this blah blah blah," and we'll tell him as if we were talking to you,
Mhm.
right? Like
Right.
and so I think, for a 6-year-old, he actually handles himself very very well with people. Again, all things considered, he still is 6, so but
Right.
he's a really good kid. So anyway, I don't sit here and
No, that's awesome.
talk awesome about my kid, like,
Well, I mean, that's what the whole thing's about, right? Right.
well, not all about, my kid. I mean, like every show, I'll probably put a little snippet in there about it. But I do think that's a good and valuable thing to do, is to include them. Now, let me ask you this, because I try to avoid any kind of what I call using my child as a political prop. And
Right.
it's a fine line when you take them to events, right? Because, like, there are pictures of my son holding up like a Joe Jorgensen sign, or a picture
Right.
with Spike Cohen, when
Mhm.
they were running for office. And for me, I treat it like he's a cute kid. He's with me because he was like 3 at the time, or 4 or something like that. 3, he was like 3. So I'm like, he's just a cute kid that happened to be with his dad, and we got a cute photo. But otherwise, I try to limit Now your kids are older, so I'm just curious how you handled it maybe earlier, and then maybe compared to how you handle it now.
Yeah. So when I was younger, my daughter, I think she was 4 years old. I was in the Republican Party up in Indianapolis, and I ran for mayor, right? And so she was around like U.S. senators, state senators, all of that when I was running. And then the next year, the person that I helped get elected mayor, because I had backed out and endorsed another candidate, asked me to run for county treasurer. So, she grew up around all of this stuff.
Mhm.
But the thing that I like about it is I never pull them up as like a prop. Like if they want to run up and hug me on their own, that's fine. But it's kind of like you guys go mingle and do your own thing.
Mhm.
And what I like about it is they don't see these important people any different than they see anybody else. And that's one of the things that I want to drive home with them is like, you're no different than that guy that's on the presidential stage. He's
Mhm.
just doing something different than you. When I first got involved in politics, I had a very well meaning grandmother who helped raise me. She said, David, you don't belong in that. Those are all rich people. Those are all this. Those are all this. And I said, well, they seem to like me a lot. And I said, and I don't care. Like I'll park my, at the time, I think I had like a 1991 Isuzu Rodeo, right? Stick shift,
Right.
like
Right.
the base thing. So I would park it like around the block, and then I'd walk around the corner in the suit and go into GOP
Right.
headquarters or wherever I was going to speak. And so I was a little bit shallow or image conscious about that. But I just don't want them to ever think that there's like a barrier between them and somebody else that keeps them from pursuing whatever it is that
Right.
they want to do.
Yeah. When I was when he was before he was born, I was doing a pile of reading, as maybe any new parent might do. And one of the stories that I read, or maybe I read it in a book, I can't remember where I read it, but it was basically talking about how to encourage your child to be confident. And one of the things they were saying is like, one of the examples that they gave is like, hey, when you go to the doctor's office, and if when the doctor says, is there anything else? Usually your child has something. So, like, look at your child and be like, all right, Johnny, didn't you have a question for the doctor? To kind of reinforce it's not just adults here talking about you. You need to talk about you, and you need to expect that this doctor will give you the attention that you deserve. And if they're little, their question may be silly, but nonetheless, it develops that confidence in like, hey, you know, don't be afraid to talk to people. Don't see somebody as, like basically walk in a room and everybody's your equal. Is kind of the attitude that we kind of like to try to do.
Exactly. I mean, I think my favorite story about this is after I'd moved to Florida, I moved back, or I didn't move back. I went back up to Indianapolis for a convention, and my daughter was, I think, 8 at the time, right? So Rick Santorum happened to be at this convention. It wasn't like a political convention or anything. He's walking around with his bodyguard or whatever,
Mhm.
and he walks up and starts talking to me. And I said, well, you should ask my daughter. She watched all the debates when you were in the primary for president, all of that. And so he looked at her and he said, do you know who I am even? And she goes, yes, sir. And he said, did you watch the debates? And she said, yes, sir. And he said, so how do you think I did? And she goes, nah, you could have done better.
That's funny.
And he started laughing. He said, yeah, I think you've proven to be right on that.
That's too funny.
But that was when I knew like she didn't have this barrier in her mind
Right.
between, who she was and who these people she saw on TV were.
Right. That's awesome. Hey, comment for you now. I can't put the comments from Twitter from X on on the chat like I would
Okay.
because they don't come through to Rumble, but I'll just read it to you. Chris Townsend says, "Proud of you, David. No IKEA sculptures behind you." I'm not I'm not familiar with this reference, so I don't know what
Oh
that
man.
means, but
So
it sounded important, so I figured I would read that to make sure.
So and you can even, it's so funny, like when Mike was staying with me to help with Mike Tremont was staying with me to help with hurricane relief. The joke is like, I have the same place that I set up all the time. And of
Right.
course my wife decorates, so it's like very nice looking behind it.
Right.
So whenever I'm on a show with Free or any of them, they always make fun of me and say it's really like a fake backdrop, or I'm sitting in an IKEA store, and
That's funny.
and so like I said before we got on here, I'm exiled Chris, to my music room slash my boys' hangout room because they're downstairs eating dinner right now. So I will have all of the Target slash IKEA slash whatever you want to call it furniture in the background when I jump on the game show in a little bit.
That's funny. All right. So, okay. So, we know what it means to be a mentor. We know what it means to be a teacher, per se. Um, can you, or let me just first ask, do you believe there's a time and a place for both of those? Or do you just basically like, look, you should really strive to do one over the other?
Yeah, so I would say, it crosses kind of like people say in the work industry, it's like you want to be a mentor to your subordinates, but you also want them to know that there's a difference when you put on like the I'm the boss hat, right?
Hmm.
So I would say one of the examples is my oldest son likes to go fishing a lot, and so I would take him fishing, and he's a lot like me and like go 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 go. Like he doesn't like to stop until he just passes out of sleep, out of energy. And so I take him fishing, and that's like a quiet thing that he likes to do. And, I would just tell him, like, let's not talk for a little bit. I said, just listen to the noises around you, listen to the birds. It was in Tampa next to this little private airport. So I was like, listen to the planes, watch them landing over there. And I said, because this is how I feel like God speaks to you as you listen. And I said, this is also how you hear the things inside of you that maybe you don't normally make time for because we're so, go, 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 iPhone, iPad,
Hmm.
TV, video games. And I said, so just take a moment here, like sit on the end of this dock and like, let's just not talk for a while. And I want you just to listen and tell me if you feel anything or think anything, or even if you hear like some cool animal sound,
Hmm.
I want you just to be observing everything around you, be alert of what's happening. And so that's where I would say it transitions into teaching.
Hmm.
Um, I mean, there's other times where it's like, you did this at school, you can't do this, so you're grounded from this. So
Right.
that's where I would say it goes into teaching or like disciplinarian. But yeah, try to take those moments where I'm teaching my kids things that you can't necessarily demonstrate. Like you can't demonstrate to them, okay, we're going to sit in silence by ourselves now because we're
Right.
together. But
Right.
try to reinforce those habits that are good.
That's very interesting. I just saw a video. It's not really related to this conversation, but it's a teacher and she was complaining and saying like kids don't know how to be bored. And she said they come to school and she said, and, she was complaining and saying like they can only receive small sound bites and then
Mm,
they're basically glued to their phones. And so I think what you just pointed out is actually a very simple and easy way to help reinforce maybe attention spans. Because I mean, there are real issues with attention spans, but then there are, I guess I would say, like environment created issues where we're glued to our phone, we're looking for the next sound
mhm,
bite, all that good
mhm.
stuff, right? So that's very interesting. And by the way, Andy, I don't, I guess it's O2R. I'm not sure who that.
Yeah,
They point out time outside with your kids is extremely important. I agree. And I try to
definitely.
get my son outside all the time with me, working in the yard, taking the dog for a walk, going out on the lake. There's a lake behind us, and we'll go out on our little paddle boat thing that we've got, but we try to get outside and get away from the screens. So,
Yeah, we have kind of a grassy area across the street from our house, which is
mhm.
why we decided to move to this house. And I mean, you know how it is in Florida. There's like the rainy season where it's like, I don't blame you guys, go play video games. I don't know what else to
Right.
tell you to do right now. But then when it's nice out, I'm like, get out there. I actually take their phones away and I bought walkie-talkies that are like long range. And I say, go out into the neighborhood, find your friends, knock on their doors. I don't want to see you go out and play.
Mhm.
Or, sometimes we'll just go out and practice baseball because they love baseball. But
Right.
yeah, I try to reinforce, like, I remember I was in that probably the last generation that did this, where we'd come home from school and my mom would do our homework with us and then be like, all right, I'm locking you out of the house, come back at dark, And
Right. Right.
you just had to figure things out. You had
Yeah.
to get in trouble because the neighbors were like, no, you can't do that. Because,
Right.
it was
I'll
like the
call your
community
mother.
helped pick. Exactly, exactly. And I think there's something lost when you don't let kids. I mean, explore, but I mean, for real, like get in trouble from other people because they see
Right.
what's socially acceptable, what's not acceptable. And it's not
Yeah.
just their parents telling them.
Right. Yeah. No, it's interesting because my view is that little boys, particularly, but also little girls, depends on the personality more
Yeah.
so than little boys necessarily. But since I have a boy, little boys are going to get in trouble.
Mhm.
In fact, I kind of almost put it in my mind that's their job. Their job is to push the boundaries, to try to figure things out. And sometimes they're going to get it wrong. And as long as it's not like crazy egregious, like if he goes and he starts kicking the dog, we have a problem.
Yeah.
That's a big
Yeah.
deal, but like earlier, he was trying to play with the dog and he threw the toy directly at the dog. And I was like, hey, hey, hey. I was like, throw the toy toward the dog, but not at the dog. I know you're trying to play, right? And so we try to like just let him do and then correct as needed at a level that's appropriate.
Right, right. And that's what I would call like I think this is one of the topics I threw out to you when we were first discussing the show is that's what I would call like parenting in the gray area.
Mhm.
And in my faith and in life, you're raised to believe like everything's black and white, everything's right or wrong. And the older I get, I'm like, I don't think so. I think there's like boundaries that you want to stay in. And there's like a lot of gray area in there. So that's what I try to teach my kids is I'm not going to nitpick every little thing you're doing, but if you go too far, you're going like I'm going to bring the hammer down, and
Mhm.
you're gonna understand like you're without blank for a while, whatever that
Right.
thing is. Like you're
Right.
grounded or you're not going to see your friends for a while. Whatever the situation calls for.
Now, I know it's very popular in the libertarian community. Are you would you call yourself a peaceful parent or a gentle parent or any of those other terms?
I don't know those terms.
Okay, so I'm not really sure what the difference between peaceful and gentle, but I know they revolve around the idea of like not spanking, not using physical punishment. That's the primary thing, but I think also like not maybe not maybe they don't rule out yelling per se, but maybe certain types of yelling. So the yelling that I got when I was growing up would not qualify, right? Because
Yeah,
I grew up
yeah,
Gen X, and we are an
yeah,
entirely different breed.
yeah,
We were bred differently, um, but and
yeah.
some of the
I
things
mean,
that my
I'm
mom
your
said to
age,
me, I
so
would
yeah.
not repeat to other people. And I love my mama, by the way. Don't get me
Oh
wrong.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, I don't know if you did, but like my mom had a paddle with our initials hanging on the
Oh yeah,
wall,
we didn't have one
right?
with our initials,
Oh my gosh,
but
I was like, why? Like people came over, they're like, do you actually get spanked with that? I was like, no, she uses a dowel rod, um, I I would say this when they're I would this is I call it like gradual unsheltering, right? So
mhm,
when they were younger, before
mhm,
they can reason, if they were going to do something like if they were going to run out into the street, for me that would warrant like spanking them because it's like I want you to understand that's going to hurt you if you do that.
right,
And when you're younger, you don't connect those things. You can't
right,
sit a kid down and be like, "Now listen, child, I know you don't understand what life is, and I know you don't understand what death is, but that car is going to smash you." And you're like, that doesn't work. Like
right,
that's just ignorant if you think that's going to work, in my opinion. Or like if you're going to stick, a paper clip in a light socket, it's like, no,
right,
I'm probably going to smack your hand because I want you to understand that's going to be painful, much
right,
worse if you do that. But I mean, that's not my go-to form of punishment.
right,
I mean, obviously, any parent who doesn't yell at their child, I look at that the same way as any married couple that doesn't fight. You just don't care about them enough to be concerned about them.
right.
And so yeah, I would say there's disagreements. There's not. I don't like yelling, so yelling's probably a bad word. I would say like speaking strongly to them, but it's just whatever and it's child dependent. So I don't like it when people say blanket like, oh well, I don't spank
Mm,
my child. It's like, well, that explains why nobody wants to be around your child. Or I don't ever discipline my child. I just speak with them, and I'm like, yeah, I can tell because I don't invite you over because your
right,
child will break everything in my house and try to rip all the fur off my dog,
right.
and so it's very child dependent though. Like my youngest, all he has to know is that I'm disappointed in him, and he like breaks down. He's very different than
Mhm.
my other two. So that's why, I don't like blanket.
Right.
This is the way to do everything, because it's. I mean, you can't. Me and you wouldn't even treat each other the same way we would treat other people that we know.
Right.
It's just
Right. And that's a good
ignorant of.
point. Like
Yeah,
if you and I get into a tiff about something, we're probably going to handle it differently than if it's somebody that that I already have a rocky relationship with. Right,
right.
and I think that's a very good point, is that your children, they're all individual, and so and I saw I'm the first of 3, and we're all 6 years apart. So my brother's 12 years younger than me, my sister's 6 years younger than me, and, like, I was the hellion, so I was the one that got spanked daily, sometimes twice in case mom missed something that I probably did, right? That's the running joke, and then my brother, they did something entirely different and weird. They would just be like, "Do you need a spanking or a hug?" And that fool would sit there and think about it, and he'd be like and then he would be dead serious. He would be like, "Mom, I probably need a spanking, but I would really like a hug." I was like, "Who is this kid? What is going on here? And how come I never got these choices?" 'Cause we already know what I would have said. You're right, like, the kids are different, and they gotta be handled different. And I agree with you.
Yeah.
I for me, the idea of spanking is kind of like this rudimentary tool that's not
Mm,
off the table, but it's not my go-to.
right.
Because as I explained to people, I'm like, let's think about this for a second. I don't want to hit my kid. However, if hitting my kid will prevent him from running out in front of the street, out in front of a car in the street, then yes, I totally will. And we'll deal
Right.
with the ramifications. I mean, I'm not gonna like beat on him or anything like crazy, but
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
like something to kind of grab his attention and be like, "Hey, don't do this." Because I would rather him be a little bit fearful for circumstances like that, which I think is what hitting tends to do.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. I would say it's the difference between correcting and intimidating.
mhm,
Because I feel like there are a lot of people who think that the best way to parent is through intimidation, and I think
right.
that's abusive. There's a big difference in my mind between those two things, and I think that if you are spanking your child for them to be scared of you
Mhm,
or to be intimidated of you, versus you're punishing them in a way to be scared of what worse could have happened instead of
mhm.
that. I think it's hard to see from the outside, but I think that those are two very different mindsets.
I think so. I think so, and I would argue that the first one, the one where you say like intimidation, I bet that a lot of people don't even realize that's why they're spanking. I think people do it and they tend to believe, "Hey, I'm spanking my kid because it's the right and proper thing to do, and I don't want them to grow up and be a crazy serial killer." Right? And so I
Exactly,
think
exactly.
they have good intentions, but I think ultimately it's more of a do as I say because I am in charge attitude rather than we're trying to develop you so that you can grow up and be a useful member of society.
Yep. Yep. And one of the things I try to drive home to my kids is I do want you to do what I say because I say it,
Mhm.
but like immediately. But I want you to also, if you don't understand why, to ask me afterwards. But, there's going to be instances where it could be a life or death situation for you to respond immediately. And so I
Right.
want that to be your immediate reaction, is to respond right away. But I
Mhm.
want you to also feel free to, again, going back to the I'll never lie to you, come and ask me why. Like, what was the reason for that if you don't understand,
Right.
when they reach the point where they're reasoning?
Right. And the other thing I've noticed since we're on this topic, since I almost never actually like my son has never had a formal spanking, like the kind where you like bend him over the knee and you give him like
Yeah,
more than one swat. He's had
exactly.
a
Yeah.
single swat a handful of times. And
Hmm.
every time was what I would consider to be a serious situation where where the alternative is possibly getting seriously hurt. Um, but
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
so he's never had that, but since he's had it so infrequently, now I can just be like, look, does daddy need to get angry and, be mad at you? And do we need to have an argument? And he'll be like, when he's mad or something, and he's getting ready to do something foolish, right? And then he'll like think about it and he'll just be like, no, and I'm like, all right, well then let's chill out and let's take a break, go do something and then we'll reconvene or whatever. Right. And so I think there's a value in when people do it frequently, it just becomes, oh, mom or dad's mad again, whatever. Right. As
Hmm.
opposed to, hey, this is out of the ordinary. What's up? Why is dad so angry? Why is mom so angry? So, or
Right.
why am I in so much trouble? Right.
And part of it is I want them to be able to be like independent. Going back to you want to raise children that people want to be around.
Right.
And a lot of people grow up with this attitude of it's always the other person's problem, right?
Hmm.
So I try to tell my kids, the first thing you do if there's an issue that you have with somebody is you explore every possible way that it's your fault first
Hmm.
before you start blaming the other person.
It's a
Like
good idea.
you assume it's your needless offense, or you assume it's your misunderstanding. And if you can't deal with it that way, then you go to the other person. You don't blame them. And part of that is being independent. Like my oldest son likes to go on a mission trip every year with our church, and last year, I mean, they went to like Alaska
Hmm.
and slept on the floor, and they were helping some of the indigenous tribes there with I don't know what, but like I can't send a misbehaving unruly
Right.
14-year-old on a trip like that. I'm not gonna
Right.
I'm not gonna put somebody through that. So it's all dependent on how much trust I can have in them as well, on what they're able to do. That whole what I said, like the gradual unveiling. it's
Mhm.
it's what they can handle at the time, whether it's what's in front of their face with movies and all of that. And I mean, going back to the screen time thing, I've had teachers call me and ask what I do differently because my kids aren't falling asleep in class.
Ah,
And I said, they get every electronic device removed from their room at bedtime.
mhm, mhm.
So, like, whether or not they're playing on them, whether or not we're all hanging out and playing chess. My boys love to play chess, right?
Right.
I won't say 4D chess because
Right.
that phrase is loaded right now. But we'll do that. And so, but whatever it is, they know I'm going to come in and I'm going to say, all right, where's your phone? Where's your whatever they have? And it's going in my closet for the night. And they're going to go to sleep. And
Right.
apparently, that's so radical these days. I also don't let them on social media. So when you graduate high school, you can get on social media, but I can't even imagine how miserable my life would have been if every stupid thing I did from the time I was 13 on up had been logged for the entire world to see.
I'm
and,
telling
and
you.
I wasn't that bad of a kid, but still, I mean, your brain. Like, I would argue that men aren't ready for that until they're like what, like 35, probably.
Right, right,
But still, like, yeah, I said once you graduate high school, you can make the decision if you want to get on social media or not.
right.
So those are like two of the things that I actually do get criticized a lot for, from
Interesting.
other
No,
parents.
we limit screen time. And then I've been noticing that, because we'll set it up with a certain amount of time that's available every day. But he has to do like homework first. And so we start with like Monday through Thursday. The idea is supposed to be doing homework first, then, somewhere around Thursday, Friday in the weekend, if you got all your homework done, then you'll have more free time with with his tablet. It's technically my tablet, but
Right.
he uses it mostly. And then even now I'm like, I've noticed that he'll just like, if he's got 2 hours on it, he'll just watch the whole 2 hours. And I noticed that there's a difference in attitude when he watches a sustained amount of YouTube. So I'm like, and he's watching like kids stuff. It's just,
Yeah.
I'm like,
Yeah.
all right, it's been an hour. Go play, go do something. And he's like, can I go play Legos? Yes, you can. Go right ahead, play with Legos. Take your dog outside. Do anything that's not related to a screen.
Right. Right. Absolutely. My I've had, I mean, I have probably my oldest son. I mean, you
Mhm.
have to, as the oldest son. He probably gets grounded the most from devices. And
Right.
it's like a night and day difference when he knows he can't have like his phone.
Mhm.
um his behavior changes 100%. And I don't know what it is. It's like all of a sudden he's super polite, he's
Mhm.
willing to do anything. And I think that goes to, we default to the easiest things a lot of time, and we become lazy as parents, and kids thrive in structure.
Mhm.
But we get tired doing our normal thing, and so it's hard to give structure. But I'll tell you right now, you give my 15-year-old a list of stuff and he is super excited. Like he planted like three or four different flowers in our landscaping today. He pruned some of the different trees and stuff like that we have on our property. And I don't know what else he did, but it's like that boy is so happy when he has a list of things that he can just accomplish one right after the other, and know that when he's done with that, he's done, and then he can relax and he can do the things that he wants to do. But when he comes home and doesn't really have that structure, he just gets into trouble. And
Right.
I mean, I'm sure my youngest will too. He's just not into that teenage phase yet.
Mhm.
But that's one of the things where I realized, like, man, kids, whether or not they fight it, they really desire that structure, because structure is comfort when you're young enough that you're not in control and you know that somebody else is in control. And I feel like that, again, saying it a lot, but comforts children in a way that we don't realize if we're not doing it.
Gotcha. We're getting closer to time, and I know that you have to go and jump on another podcast here in a few moments. So, to summarize, just make sure there's anything before we ask you our dad question of the evening. To summarize, Um, teaching is basically just kind of like pointing and telling you go do this, and then yes or no. And then for you, the difference between that and mentoring is, helping them out, working alongside with them, helping them, recognize that failure is a good thing and that it happens. As Andy pointed out here, he said that but two best things for kids is to teach them fiscal responsibility, and that failure is a good thing. And I think mentorship does help reinforce the idea of, failing as a value add. I mean, it's not necessarily
Mhm.
fun, but it's a value add.
Yeah.
What else is missing from those two things that you think people need to know about?
Well, I do want to point in there because Andy knows this as well, and that's probably why he made this comment. My 15-year-old has two businesses already that he
Oh,
started.
nice.
And one of them is pressure washing. I mean, he makes a decent amount of money. Another one of them is we live on a golf course. He was like, I'm going to go find all the balls that got lost, wash them, clean them up, and sell them outside on the golf cart
Hmm.
path. And he'll make up to like $150 a day doing that. So it's
Wow.
not like joke money. He's figuring out ways. Like, I mean, I'm proud of. He's figuring out ways to have a job or a business where he can control his schedule,
Right.
which I like. But the final thing is, I would say, be quick to apologize when you mess up as a parent.
Mhm.
I teach my kids, like, it goes along with that search yourself first, mentality of like, is it needless offense on my part, or was it really the other person doing something to me? As I
Mhm.
said, even if you think you're wrong, if it reaches a point where like a relationship is disrupted, you be the first person to apologize. You be the first person to restore that relationship with the other person. But I can't tell them to do that if those moments where they do something that is like so outrageous that it just gets me angry, and I'll like yell or something, if I'm not coming to them and apologizing for that. So that's what I always tell, parents don't like to do that because,
Mhm.
the parent needs to be in charge, the parent needs to be
Right.
right. But no, I definitely like will go into their room, when they're getting ready for bed or something, and be like, hey man, I misunderstood you. I shouldn't have said this, or I shouldn't have done that. Or,
Mhm.
I thought I was making a joke, but it really hurt your feelings, that kind of thing. I want to be the first person to apologize and model that for them so that they're doing that in their daily life as well with other people.
Right. Good stuff. As I'm pulling that up, I'll just point out that earlier, I missed this comment. Uh, Joe says, and I'll put it up on the screen here. DL asking his kid what he prefers. Do you want to get smacked by my hand or that car? But hey, if it's the
Yeah.
if that's the choice, a
Yeah.
dad's got to do what a dad's got to do. That's all I'm saying, right? I know people like, oh, I can't believe you would hit your kid. Like, well, if it prevents him from getting hit by a car, yes, I will.
Just tell me you've never said this is going to hurt me more than it
No,
hurts.
no, I'm not gonna. No, I heard that growing up, and I
Yeah.
I can
Yeah.
promise you, the way parents perceive that and the way children perceive that is not at all the same, I assure you.
Right.
So
Right.
let's see if I can get this question up on the screen here. Is that right? Yeah, there it goes. That works. Is there a better way to do it? No, I think that's the only way I got. Okay, so it says so this comes from a dad group in Facebook. So this is a real question. It says at 48, I feel middle-aged and stuck in a routine of work, cooking, cleaning, and sleeping with occasional breaks for family activities. Who else can relate, and what can be done about it? All right. This is your chance to shine, David. What can be done for the 40-year-old man who is feeling like it's just this constant, boring routine?
I mean, that's where I was, like I said, in 2018 and 2019, right? That I said earlier, is I just felt like I feel like I'm stuck and I need to do something different.
Mhm,
And I would say, it's not easy to make the change.
mhm,
I did have a luxury that a lot of people don't, but I would say, at other times I've decided the only way I'm going to make this change is I'm going to enroll in school and get my master's. And so there were times years before that where I would be working all day. I would come home, spend as much time as I could with my kids, feed them dinner, clean up, do all of that stuff, and literally wake up at like 4 o'clock in the morning, face down on my keyboard of my laptop because I fell asleep doing my schoolwork. But I knew that I needed to make some kind of change for the future because I knew where I was wasn't where I was always going to be, and I didn't
mhm.
want to not have options in the future. So I would say it's worth being exhausted, um, if you know there's an end to that and there's an end to that cycle you feel stuck in. And I would just say, like, exhaust yourself to get out of that if that's what you need to do, because it's totally worth it. And I can say that from experience.
Awesome. Good words. I'm going to go to closing. I'm going to put you backstage. I know you got to get to another podcast. So if you got to go, you got to go, and that's fine. But if you stick around, we can chit chat for a minute after the show is over. But thank you again so much for joining me. It has been an absolute pleasure talking about mentoring and teaching. So, folks, if you're just tuning in or you're tuning in a little bit late, definitely worth going back and listening to everything. So, thank you so much, David. I'm going to put you backstage for a second. All right, folks. Thank you again for joining me. This has been great. And let me get to that closing here. So here we are. Thank you for watching, and I hope you found this episode informative and inspiring. Be sure to catch me Monday through Friday, 7:30 a.m. for an informed discussion on politics and culture. Make sure that you're subscribed to my YouTube channel, or if you prefer my Rumble channel, you can go to youtube.libertydad.com, or you can go to rumble.libertydad.com. While you are there, let me know how I'm doing by leaving me a comment. You can also become part of the community by heading over to libertydad.locals.com. Remember, if you're a champion of liberty, your business is people and your product is liberty. I want you to have a great week. Catch you next time. But for now, I'm out.